Joining us today on Outside the Oval is Matt Baxter of NAZ Elite. Before NAZ Elite, Matt competed on the NAU cross-country team that won 3 straight NCAA championships. Matt, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get started today, I got to say just how special today's show is for me. Not only is it the 15th episode, so we are still kind of new on this journey of podcasting, but to have you on the show, Matt, makes it feel even more special. I mentioned this to you just before we got started, but when I first started falling in love with the sport, you were one of the top guys in the NCAA, and you quickly became one of my favorite runners. So again, I appreciate you jumping on today's show. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. Because while planning this episode, I had a laundry list of questions to ask you, and it was really difficult narrowing it down today when I had to select just a few to ask during the interview. Because you have such an interesting story, exciting timeline, and it's really turned out to be a successful running career so far in the young journey of yourself. I've even gotten to read your book. Oh man, it's right up there. Hurt Me If You Can. I have it sitting on my desk. I'll show you afterwards. But being able to read that as well as kind of following your career, it's been great. But I will start with this. As soon as you came to Northern Arizona, you made an immediate impact. You placed 11th at your first NCAA cross-country championship race. And that ended up, like I mentioned, winning 3 championships with NAU. But before that, you had to decide where you'd run collegiately in the United States, having spent all your life previously in New Zealand. So I'll ask you this. Why did you choose to run at NAU, and were there any other schools you considered running at?
Yeah, so when I had finished high school, I had no immediate desire to come over to the US. And so I didn't actually come over to the US until 3 years out of high school. I did 2.5 years of studying in New Zealand, then took a semester to basically work, and then I came over to the US. And so by that time, when I was looking seriously at colleges, I guess I was 20. My best sort of times were, I'd run, I think 14:10 for a 5K. I'd had some pretty decent cross results, but I'd also had an entire year out for injury. And so for me, trying to convince colleges to take me was not an easy task, because it's an investment taking on an international, and I appreciate that much more now that I've been in the system. I mean, when you look at allocating scholarships, if you're having someone for indoor, outdoor, and cross, that's not just one scholarship. I mean, that's 3. And so when I was looking at different colleges, I didn't think it was going to be that hard to find something, because I thought I was running pretty decently. And I had some offers right out of high school. I never decided to take any of them. But it ended up being a really difficult task. I basically put together a resume and sent it off to every D1 school that had a good running program and had a criminology degree. I was already the majority of the way through my criminology degree. There's no point in me changing. I enjoyed doing that. So it narrowed down schools, and I think all up, I might have had responses from possibly 5 different programs. One that was initially really keen was Eastern Kentucky. And I didn't know a lot about schools in the US. And so I was just going based off what I was being told by the coaches. And the reason why I was like, oh no, Eastern Kentucky didn't feel right was just they wanted me to come almost right away within a couple of months. And I wanted to give it till the end of the year, which would have been another 7 months or so away. And so that just didn't work out. They had a time limit on their scholarship, and I was like, okay, no, it's not gonna suit. I think I heard back from a Florida, I don't know if it was Florida State possibly, and my times just weren't quite good enough to get onto their program, which was fair because I was 20 years old. As an international, I probably should have been running a little bit better for a program like that. And so then it ended up getting narrowed down a little bit to Louisville and NAU. And I was really going all in on Louisville. I mean, I can say this now because I love my time at NAU, but I looked up NAU online. I looked up the athletics website, and to be honest, I wasn't super impressed by it. I just thought like, this just looks like kind of a small school, and I didn't get a good sense for the facilities they had. I didn't know much about the NCAA, so I didn't realize how incredible their history was. And so I kind of put NAU on the back burner and went all in on Louisville. And then in the end, Louisville hit a bit of a dead end. They just didn't have scholarships available. And then suddenly I realized that, oh no, like I haven't even really followed up with NAU because I had gone down this Louisville path. And this was at the point where NAU was my absolute last opportunity. If NAU wasn't going to work out, I wasn't going to come over. And I ended up getting in contact with Eric Hines after I'd originally sent a resume to him, and we had a bit of a period of not communicating with each other because I thought Louisville was going to work out. And so, yeah, I had a really good race in Australia. I think I was fifth at the Australian senior men's cross country champs. It was like 36:10 for a 12K. And there was a guy who used to be on the NAU team who was there watching, who resides in Australia. And he ended up calling Hines and was like, hey, you got to take this guy. Like this, he just kicked down guys who were running 28, 40 or whatever for the 10K. I think he could be a big cross guy. And then I had already been in contact a little bit with Hines at that point, but we hadn't officially said that I would look at going there. But that race, that conversation by Ben Ashkettle, who was the guy from Australia, that really helped solidify me coming onto the team. And my girlfriend was also there in Australia. She got looped into that call. She came over with me as well. We both went to NAU. And so it was kind of a weird path to NAU. It actually ended up being my absolute last resort, which is funny now because you look at NAU, it's like, I mean, you could say it's one of the best, if not the best distance program in the country, certainly the best cross-country program in these recent times. And for me, it was like, oh, thank goodness I can come over to the US to this school, which I hope is going to be good. And then, yeah, I ended up coming over in January 2016.
That's an awesome story, and I think I find it incredibly funny that now Coach Eric Hines, we'll talk about this later, is now at Louisville. So those two are kind of interconnected. But that's an awesome story here and how you ended up there. And yeah, NAU is definitely a powerhouse, and they still are for the foreseeable future. But fast forward real quick to your second track season. You finished 7th in the 10K at the National Championships, and everything seemed to kind of start building for you. You had an incredibly strong team entering 2017, but this time it was under new leadership. So in your first cross season, where you guys won your first championship, you ran for Coach Eric Hines, like we just mentioned, and he announced he was going to move on following the season. He was transitioned to Coach Mike Smith in year 2. So what was that transition between two coaches like for you in terms of like training and how the team dynamic kind of went? And what were some differences as well?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time, and NAU went about it in a pretty unusual way where they had both coaches overlap for that 2016 cross season. Eric Hines was our head coach, like he was still the coach. Mike was more Mike Smith, who's the current NAU coach. He was more just getting a sense for what the team is like. We used to joke about when he was there over that overlapping season and over that cross season where Mike would just stand on the side of the track and just watch us. And if anything, we were like, this seems creepy. Like, what's this guy doing? But once we got to know him, we're like, he's very particular about how we look when we're doing workouts and things like that. And he was just observing, which ended up being the best possible thing that him and Eric are both their personalities didn't clash, which I think was huge for that season. If Mike was someone who came in with a big personality and he basically tried to start taking over the program, we might not have even won in 2016 because we needed solid leadership. And so that was really important that Eric kept things going through there. It was a hard time for me because Eric had announced in the spring of 2016 that he was going to be leaving. And I had only just arrived maybe, I don't know, 4 months or something before. I had only been on the team for a couple of months when our strength coach announced that he was leaving. People were upset. And for me, that was weird. I'm like, I mean, I've only been here for a couple of months. I don't really know this guy. He seems like a cool dude, but people were kind of upset about that. And it's like, oh, whatever. And then Hines announced he was leaving. I'm like, you serious? Like, I just got here. Like, I put so much on the line, invested so much coming to the US, and then within not even a semester, the coach who I thought I was coming over here to be trained by for at least 3 years is now gone. So that had I had some mixed feelings about that at first. But then Mike came on, and Mike's an incredible dude. He did a great job of easing himself into the team and really getting to know people. And then when we had that transition of we won at Nationals in 2016, and that was Eric's basically last day on the job. He left not long after that. And then Mike took over straight away in January. Mike made sure that it was a pretty seamless transition, that he eased us into his new style of training. I think some of his training methods were quite new to a lot of us. I mean, you look at things that he's doing now with the NAU team, with some of his double T's. They do a lot of stuff on treadmills. Some of their workouts mimic professional type workouts that we don't often see publicly. But yeah, so it was a transition. The training was definitely different, but I think I really brought into it because after I think about 2 months, I ran a 25-second PR in the 5K, and that qualified me for indoor nationals. And so straight away I was like, even though I was still benefiting from Eric's training, like I had a huge cross season with him. I had been healthy going into that indoor season. So I was still working off an Eric base. It was just some fine tuning that Mike had me do during the indoor season. But that just straight away, I was like, wow, I'm running really well off of Mike's training. I completely buy into this. I really like it. And then, yeah, things just keep going well from there.
So that leads me to the topic I'm probably most excited to talk about with you today, even though this race didn't go 100% the way you wanted it to. But this was my favorite cross-country race of all time. It is the 2017 National Championship race in Louisville, where you and your teammate Tyler Day took out the race, kind of commanded it from the front. And I talked to my teammates New and Old about this race often, as I believe it's just beautiful racing up and down the card, from the front of the field to the back of the field. So much happened, so many storylines, and if you haven't given it a watch, I highly suggest that those who aren't familiar with this race go watch it on YouTube. With that being said, like I mentioned, this race didn't go the way you wanted it to. You came in second, ended up getting hawked down by Justin Knight of Syracuse, who had added to his extremely incredible collegiate career and win his first ever cross-country championship. But could you bring me through that race and what it was like racing in Louisville that day?
Yeah, it was a race which was completely focused around the team, and me and Tyler's plan to go to the front and push. That was all designed basically that we were hoping a portion of the field would go with us, and that the pace would be fast enough that those people would then start dying off, and our teammates who didn't go with us would then start coming through and picking people off and picking up places. So although it looks like a very individual effort, like me and Tyler are just going to the front trying to push for the win, the whole purpose of it, and it actually ended up working out perfectly, the whole purpose of it was to really stretch out the field and really test people early on. And because it's only our teammates who know what me and Tyler are going to do, that we're going to push for in the entirety of the 10-kilometer race, that they could sit back and be a little more relaxed because they know exactly what's happening up the front. They know that we're not going to let off, we're going to keep pushing, and then when people start dying, they can just slowly start moving through the pack and getting some points for the team. And this was a plan we had actually decided on pretty early in the season. Me and Tyler knew our strengths, that we work really well off of a fast pace, and both of us coming off a really solid track season, and things going really well early into the cross-country season. I would say probably within a month of the cross-country season, we knew that was what we were going to do at Nationals. There was a little bit of concern on the day because it was pretty windy. When we got to the course, and Mike took me and Tyler separately, he pulled us aside and he asked us each, like, hey, do you guys still want to employ the tactic? Because if you do go to the front, you know you're going to get hit with the brunt of the wind the whole time. And the risk of that is any kind of individual goals can get threatened, because if we're pushing into the wind for 10K, then and a decent pack went with us, then you know that people are going to fly by you in the last, I don't know, 400-600 meters, maybe even further back, depending on how hard it was. But both me and Tyler in our separate conversations with Mike said, no, we want to still do this. We still want to go to the front and push the pace. We know that's what's going to be best for us. We know that's what's best for the team. And so we stuck with that decision. And it actually went pretty much perfectly to plan. Me and Tyler got out really well. The rest of our team, bar one, Corey Glines, had a hard fall at the start and gashed up his shin. It was actually 2 years in a row that he'd fallen within the first K, so it was a really unfortunate and tough day for him. But 6 of our guys got out really well, positioned really well. Me and Tyler went straight to the front. We were within the front by we came through the first K in the front together. And we knew that we were in a good place, that our fitness was in a good spot to maintain a really solid effort around the course. And yeah, when we came through that first kilometer, I turned to Tyler and just said, this is just another tempo in Buffalo Park, because basically every week we're doing 8-10 mile tempos in Buffalo Park, and so we're used to being side by side. And even when we're doing tempos together, we'll often bump elbows because we get so close to each other. And so we got used to that in races, that we're running so close that we'll occasionally like bump into each other's elbow, and we'll always be like, oh, sorry dude, like whenever we do that, and so everything was going really well. And then I can't remember exactly which athlete it was, but one of the Alabama athletes made a hard move at one point in the race, and that was kind of a defining moment for me and Tyler, because that was the first time we had relinquished the lead, and I imagine that was around 3 kilometers ish into the race. And Tyler actually tried to go with him, and I hung back because I knew, like, dude, we're doing exactly what we need to do. We don't need to go with him. And then Tyler glanced back, so I didn't go with him, and so he came back to me, and then me and Tyler just kept pushing our pack through the rest of the race. And this won't happen again, I don't imagine, but for whatever reason, the majority of the field never went with us. We took it out relatively hard, but not hard enough that a bunch of these guys couldn't have held on. And especially if we're taking the wind for everyone, we're controlling the pace, there was no reason that people couldn't have gone with. I'm just assuming that people thought we were probably going to die and we were going to come back. It was like a silly move. And so by 2-3K, we only had a smallish pack, and everyone else had already decided they weren't going to go with us. And yeah, when the Alabama athletes started making a move, me and Tyler just stayed pretty relaxed. We came through 5K. The gap hadn't really extended, but it was decent enough that we didn't want it to get too much longer. And then we ended up catching that athlete around, I would say around 6.5K maybe. And by that point, we were only a pack of 3, maybe 4. And yeah, me and Tyler had got into a really comfortable rhythm. We just stayed side by side, bumping shoulders, keeping things going. And we had actually, this is the part that in hindsight annoys me, because this was where our move was supposed to be made. And Mike had told us that there's one really decent hill coming into, I would say it's around a mile to go. It's like your final climb, and then you crest the top, and then you start going downhill for like 600 meters into the finish. And Mike had told us, like, you have to hit that hill hard. When you get to that crest, you should have almost nothing left, because it's going to be almost downhill to the finish. And we came into that hill, and I was just like, man, I'm feeling it. Like at that point, like me and Tyler have been pushing for 8 kilometers into the wind, and it was starting to feel pretty rough. And so we pushed the hill decently hard, but we should have gone all out up that thing. That was our last opportunity to try and break Justin, and I don't think we completely took it. Which once again, in hindsight, I'm like, man, it would have just been interesting to see how Justin would have responded to a really hard move on that hill, especially because he said in post-race interviews that he was kind of cramping up and he was starting to hurt a bit. So that was the part where me and Tyler made a bit of a mistake. And then yeah, we crested the hill. It started bombing downhill, 600 meters to go. I decided this was my moment to try and go for the individual title, and so I made a really hard move, and it was a nice, pretty gentle downhill, flat, going through some trees, and it was pretty insane coming into that final straight in the lead. I mean, the crowd is just, I mean, I don't even know how many people deep it was, but it can be deafening running in that race when you're running by the crowd at different points. But coming into that home straight when everyone is screaming, that was just, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. But the thing I'll also never forget was the majority of the chants were for Justin, which was a little rough. Like I came into that home straight and I'm like, I'm gonna give it everything for the win, and all I hear is Justin Knight, let's go Knight, Knight, Knight. All I'm hearing his name in my ears. So I knew he was obviously very close and that he has an incredible kick. It was going to be pretty hard to hold him off, but I mean, I did everything I can. I was super happy with getting second in the end, turning it around, seeing Tyler come through in third. Peter Lamont coming through in eighth was insane for our team. And then when we had Andy came through next, Geordie was next in fifth, and as soon as Geordie came through in fifth across the line, I mean, he threw his arms up. He knew we'd won straight away. And that was the big thing. Like getting second as an individual, I was really hyped about, but winning the back-to-back championship and having the team to celebrate with, I mean, that definitely topped any kind of individual feelings I had.
Yeah, it's such a great race, and it's one I go back and watch often. And as you mentioned, the team won, which I'm sure brings back a much more positive light to that day. So with that, NAU core would end up returning much of its team in 2018 as well, and end up securing that third straight championship that I'm sure you guys were really excited to achieve at Nuttycombe that year in another instant classic race. So being on that team for 3 years, cross country and track included, what were some moments as a NAU Lumberjack that we haven't mentioned that really stick out and really laminate your career as a NAU Lumberjack?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, because I guess a lot of my career was surrounded around cross. I mean, that's kind of why I was brought in, was as a cross athlete, and that's where I mostly excelled. It's funny, like even this, if I look at some of my highlights at NAU and some of the races which I'm particularly proud of, that second place at Nationals in 2017 is definitely a highlight. But another big one for me was in 2018. 2018 at conference for cross, I won that race, and that was my first conference title. I went 3 years, and like I did pretty well on the track and pretty well on the grass. But you was such a strong team, and I just could never win a Big Sky Conference title. And so people were joking to me about like, oh, you're going to finish your career, you're going to get second to nationals, but you're never going to have a Big Sky title. And so I fought really hard for that one. I mean, me and Tyler were both in that race, and our team, the whole point of that race was for us to go really hard as like a last hit out before nationals in 2018. And so we all pushed really hard. And I mean, I have Tyler, who's just got third at nationals, who I have to try and beat to win a conference title. And I did. I ended up pulling away from him, and that was probably one of my proudest races that I had, because I worked so hard for that conference title. I may only have one, but that one was really hard fought. I was thinking I was going to win nationals that year. Like I was so fit and coming off Big Sky and everything. I was like, oh man, I'm in such a good place. And especially when you get second, you feel like there's only one way to go. That didn't quite work out, but yeah, that conference race, making it to indoor nationals, my second year in 2017 was huge. Although that race was not great because I lost my shoe at 2K, and so I ran 3K with just one shoe on, and I think I still have lingering issues because of doing that. I wouldn't recommend ever continuing to run on one shoe. But even outside of the performances, I just loved being on the NAU team. I was really actually when I finished at the end of 2018 after Cross, when we won that last national title, that was when I was graduating and I was all done. A part of it was a relief because going into these national title, when you're trying to win a national title, I mean, there's a lot of pressure that goes into that. And so you carry a lot, and especially during the cross country season. And so I was happy to be done because I was like, I felt like I've done everything I could do. We won 3 titles in a row. I couldn't have done any more than that. And so I left at a really good place. But I really missed the team, though. That was the hardest thing about leaving college. I mean, our team was so close. I love going on trips with those guys. And I love even just our little camping trip thing we did at the start of every season, every cross season, even though we actually didn't go camping, but more of like a bonding trip, I guess. It was just, I just really enjoyed being on that team. I really brought into what we were doing at NAU, and a lot of that is in credit to Eric and Smith, and not only their coaching and how they worked with the team, but also helping keep some of the team traditions alive. Because that was one of the things where you feel so close to your teammates on that NAU team, is just because of the traditions which have been handed down over 50 plus years. And I truly miss that. Even though I live in Flag and I see the guys all the time, that I think those college days are something. I mean, it's true. Like you don't realize how special they are until they're over. And even though I've been able to continue running, and I'm still running in Flagstaff, and a lot of things feel similar in that respect, nothing will ever compare to lining up on the start line with like those 6 other guys at NCAAs. And it's like, dude, everyone's watching us. Everyone wants to see if we're going to win again. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. That's the highlight of my time being on NAU, was like just being around the team. I thrived in that.
Yeah, you guys have really cultivated such a great team atmosphere in Flagstaff. And that kind of leads me to my next question. Amidst all of this, you get to live in the running mecca of the United States. You get to train at altitude in Flagstaff, Arizona. So real quickly, what is it like training at Flagstaff, and what is it compared to, what's it like training in Flagstaff compared to training in New Zealand?
Yeah, being at altitude can be hard, obviously. I mean, it's something you do adjust to and you do adapt to. Most people do. Some people I've seen come up here, they struggle the entire time and then they go home. So not everyone is designed to be at altitude. I think I'm someone who has thrived in some aspects, and I still struggle in possibly some other ones. But yeah, Flagstaff is also unique because it's so dry up here. That also can cause some issues. In the winter, I'm often coughing for a lot of the time because you're working it out in a dry, high climate. But once you adjust to the altitude and you adjust to what you know pace is to be, because you got to throw completely out the window what you think a good tempo paces or what you think good reps on the tracks are, because it's going to be completely different up here. But Flagstaff is incredible because it has endless dirt roads. I mean, we have access to Lumberjack Stadium at NAU. We have the indoor 300-meter track at the Dome. It's just, not only are we at 7,000 feet, which is like the ideal place to be for elevation, you can also go high. I mean, it takes half an hour to be at 9,000 feet and do incredible runs up there where it feels like you're in a completely different place. The trees are different. It's got different scenery. You're up the mountain. It also takes 40 minutes to be down at like 3,000 feet. If you're going down to Camp Verde, or if you're going to Sedona Track, maybe it's 50 minutes and you're at 5,000 feet. The ability to go high and low is what makes Flagstaff the mecca. Like, that's why Flagstaff is incredible. That ability is just something where other places might have little things which are better than Flag. I don't know, but not many, if any, have that ability. And that's why you see the best in the world come here. That's why I saw Jakob Ingebrigtsen training on the trail a month before Worlds. That's why I saw Mo Farah working out on our track before the 2016 Olympics. Like, that's why everyone comes here. And just the quick comparison to New Zealand, I absolutely love training in New Zealand. We have amazing parks. And it's just wherever you grow up as a kid, I feel like you have a sentimental relationship to running there. I mean, I'll take Tyler Day, for example. He grew up in Gilbert, Arizona, which is close to Phoenix. He enjoyed running there as a kid, but I think of it and I'm like, dude, if I ran there as a kid, I wouldn't be running still. You're running on canals, you're running on, but wherever you run as a child, it's sentimental, and New Zealand is a beautiful place to run. But once I came to Flagstaff, I realized, man, we don't have endless dirt roads in my hometown like we do in Flag. It's actually kind of hard to get a long tempo in uninterrupted when I go back home. So I appreciate both. It also rains a ton in New Zealand. It hardly ever rains up here except for our monsoon season, and you can basically skirt around that. So yeah, I appreciate both, but I mean, in terms of pure running and getting in everything I need to do, I mean, Flagstaff is really hard to beat.
For sure, and having gotten to train in Flagstaff during college, I'm sure that made your transition to the professional ranks a lot easier as you ended up signing with NAZ Elite, which also trains out in Flagstaff. So why did you end up choosing NAZ Elite, and was there really any question to where you would run once your time at NAU came to an end?
Yeah, I think after that 2017 cross race was when I realized, okay, I could probably stay. I could probably continue this as a professional. When I first came to the US, I'm just not surrounded by that. There's very few professional runners who would possibly stay in New Zealand. Most would go overseas for very good reasons. And so I never really considered that as being a proper career. And then, yeah, after 2017 cross, I was like, okay, I think I'm actually in a place where like maybe that's a possibility for me. And so when I graduated at the end of 2018, basically I was tossing up between, do I go back to New Zealand and do what I had done before coming to NAU, where I try and make it as a runner, basically on my own in New Zealand, and I try to get a contract that way, or do I stay in Flag? I just didn't want to go anywhere else in the US. I was thankful that Flagstaff wasn't too much of a culture shock. And I just felt like if I had suddenly moved somewhere else in the US, I didn't want to go through all of that again. And I realized pretty quick that the New Zealand option just wasn't going to work financially. It can be a little hard to convince a company to support you down that end of the world, just because they're probably just not getting quite the same return on you, because you're not out in the public like you are in the US. You're not doing all these US races, and your brand isn't as visible down there. I really hope that that's something that'll change at some point. But just when I was making that decision, that wasn't the case. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to stay in Flag. So what does that look like? Do I try to continue working with Mike? I was having conversations with Ben Rosario, the coach of Northern Arizona Elite, and those were basically my options, or else possibly an individual contract, which I would need to continue working with Mike. And in the end, just an individual contract just wasn't there. I absolutely loved working with Mike, and I think that would have been a great relationship. Financially, it didn't make sense. And NAZ Elite was something where, I mean, I had seen them since coming to Flag. They had existed up here since around 2013, and I had a good relationship with Ben from our conversations we had at different points over those years, and I respected him. I liked what he was talking about with the team and his vision for the team when I was having proper meetings with him after I was done at NAU. And in the end, it was like financially it made sense. I felt like I would respond well to his training. I loved being in Flagstaff. It was just everything kind of came together. And then, yeah, it was just before Christmas, because I went home Christmas 2018. So, yeah, just before Christmas, I called Ben and I was like, hey, yeah, man, I would love to stay and keep training with your team. And so I signed officially with the team January 1st, but I went home to get a visa, and I couldn't come back until like July. I had some real visa issues. And so even though I signed with the team, that was a huge bummer. going home and being like, oh, I've signed this contract. I'm super excited to be in flag and race. And then literally not being able to get back to the US. That was a really difficult time. But yeah, super glad that I signed with the NAZ. It's ended up being a great decision. And I mean, you look at how the team is continuing to grow and expand, and we've got some really exciting things for the future. So yeah, and I'm really glad I stayed in flag. I've been here for 6.5 years now, and I'm still not sick of it. I'm sure I will at one point, but I'm not yet.
Yeah, NAZ Elite is definitely on the up. In fact, they just signed Abby Nichols, who we had on the show not too long ago. So that's pretty cool, having now 2 NAZ Elite alumni on the show. It's pretty cool. But since you've become a professional, what would you say have been some of your best experiences? So from training to racing, or even outside the sport, as a professional, what are some of your favorite moments?
Yeah, I think the nicest thing as a professional is having a little more flexibility around your time. So not having class, you have no idea how draining a college schedule is when you have class until suddenly that's removed. And so that's been nice because it's freed up my time to do other things. And yeah, I think definitely I've had sort of an up and down time as a professional athlete. Like I've had some solo performances. I've had a bit of a rough go with injury, and there's different reasons for some of that stuff. But I think I'm now starting to get into a really good rhythm. So I feel like my you're going to start seeing some much better things coming in this next year or two. A couple of big things is like with Hoka's advancements in shoe tech has been incredible, and we've got new ideas coming on the coaching side. We've brought in a new coach, which has worked really well with the team, new athletes coming in. And so I think there's going to be some really exciting things there. But just as a professional athlete in general, it's just been nice to be able to live in Flagstaff and just get up and like, this is my job. There are times where running can be such a funny thing because it is hard. Like getting out of bed early and going doing a really hard workout, which might wreck you for the entirety of the rest of your day. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, this is rough. But always bringing it back to like, man, I get to do this. This is still better than me working a 9 to 5 anywhere else. I love running. And so I think, yeah, that's just been the special thing with being with the NAZ is just like appreciating that I can do this as a job, having the support from Hoka, having the support from Ben and the team, and also being able to keep things going in a college type environment. I mean, we're still not a college team. Like whenever, maybe there'll be a couple of times where there'll be an opportunity for us to line up as a team together. I haven't had that experience yet, but I know there's like this Austin race in December where some of my teammates might all line up for that. But there is still that vibe of like, this is a bunch of young-ish type people still getting together with common goals of working really hard, trying to make teams. That it has like a college type of vibe to it, which I love. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear that you're still able to implement that college kind of dynamic, maybe if you will say, to that pro team. That's what it's all about, making that team dynamic, fun. It just makes waking up in the morning to go run, like you said, it's a hard thing to do sometimes. It makes it so much more enjoyable. And so far in 2022, I know you have set a New Zealand national record in the road 5K, winning the Rock and Roll Arizona 5K in a 13:55. Even though you said your pro career has not gone the way you'd like it to so far, it's still going pretty good. And you've done some great things. So lastly, before I go, as any runner, I'm sure you have a few long-term goals, and with plenty of years left in your career, I'm curious as to what are some of your biggest career goals for yourself moving forward as a professional runner.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and as you had said, there have definitely been certain highlights throughout my pro career so far. Just to recap that, I broke the New Zealand indoor 5K record. I broke the New Zealand road 5K record. It annoys me that Geordie Beamish has since broken both of those, where he smashed both of those. The indoor 5 is going to be hard to take back, but I really want to try to take that road 5K back from him at least. I mean, I've PR'd in just about every distance. I ran 7:47 in the 3K since being on the team. I've run 62 and a half, and yeah, so in amongst like the injuries and the pandemic and going home and visa issues and uncertainty and having a kid who's now 2 years old, which I love Miles. But like all of those stresses that have gone into these past 3.5 years as a pro, there's definitely still highlights scattered throughout that. And so yeah, looking forward to the future. I mean, I'm entered for New York Marathon this November. That's going to be my debut at the distance. I was supposed to debut at that race last year, and I got hurt about 6 weeks out, and I tried to keep grinding through it, but it wasn't going to happen. So I had to withdraw from that race, unfortunately. But this year, everything's been going super smoothly, and so I'm really excited about making my debut in the marathon. And I mean, my future really rests in the marathon. That was something which I've known for a while. I do well at that kind of longer distance, and I mean, we'll still find out. I mean, I still haven't run a marathon, so I don't want to talk myself up about it. But yeah, I think that's a distance which is really going to suit me, and that's something which I'm going to start focusing on, especially for this next Olympic cycle, looking towards Paris and then even hopefully LA. LA would be incredible to still be in the US. Be living in Flagstaff. Hopefully we have a direct flight then from Flag to LA for the 28 Olympics, because everyone is going to come to Flagstaff in 2028. It's going to be insane here. So yeah, I mean, those are kind of my goals. Yeah, looking at really heavily focusing on the marathon, focusing on marathon for Paris and ultimately LA. And I imagine my career is probably not going to go too much beyond that. I would be around 34, 35 at that point. But yeah, looking at focusing on the marathon, but still bringing my track times down. I still feel like I'm not done on the track quite yet. And even, yeah, having fun with some of these shorter road races as well. I'm still looking forward to. And I want to just break New Zealand records and make teams and do all that kind of fun stuff. That I can't have Geordie Beamish's name scattered across every single thing, dude. I'm gonna make sure he can have a record or two, but he's not gonna have all of them. That's my goal. Yeah.
That's awesome too that you two kind of were teammates for a little bit at NAU, so kind of has that team camaraderie there and in different aspects. But yeah, it is awesome hearing what you aspire to do in the future, and I wish you nothing but the best moving forward. And Matt, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join me, and I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Mate, thank you. And I'm going to plug something real quick since you asked about college, and you, I imagine, have a college audience who would listen to this as well. For the past year and a half, I've been working on a project with a guy called Ron Mann. He was a coach at NAU for 24 years, from 1980 through to 2004. He was a part of NAU's legacy of a bunch of podium finishes at Cross Nationals, and he approached me about writing a book about the NAU program. And so for the past year and a half, we've been putting together a book about the program running in Flagstaff, basically the entire history of the program starting in 1964 through till today. And so that book is going to be released in March. It's called Running Up the Mountain. So keep an eye on that. We haven't put out a lot about it yet, but that's my little plug. If anyone's into finding out more about the history of the NAU program, you're going to soon have a book that encompasses the entire history of how NAU got to be right now a 5-time national championship program.
Wow, I did not know that you guys had a book coming. That's awesome. I'm definitely going to have to read that one. I think I mentioned earlier in the episode I read Hurt Me If You Can, which was a great book. Hope that did really well, and I hope this new book does even better for you. But as always, thank you all for listening today, and I'll catch you guys next time on Outside the Oval.